baseline
to baseline.
Very good execution of a 2-on-1 fast break.
Coast
to coast.
Takes it all the way down the lane.
This
Two-hand jam.
This is the NBA Today.
The NBA Today.
Give me the sort of sense of what it's like to play with a guy that's unhappy, because from the Kings' perspective, you can't be surprised. This was the knock on Demarcus Cousins when he was coming out into the draft, where you didn't know mentally where he was and what that maturity was. Right now, the Kings fans have to be frustrated, and he played last night, and he wasn't good again.
Right, and I never really played with a guy that I think was the type of malcontent that Demarcus Cousins is. This is something that's followed him around for a while, and I don't care what kind of sales pitch John Calipari gives everybody coming out of the draft, what a great kid he is, and this, that, and the other, because there were a lot of questions about his character at the time. This is who Demarcus Cousins is. He's a guy that's never happy. He's extremely egocentric. He's selfish. He doesn't get the team concept. Everything that he thinks about is, how does this affect me? And I'm living in this moment right now. And I know that personality type. Demarcus Cousins absolutely is it. And right now it's a situation that I think that people I've talked to out there that are close to the situation that are around that team, it's worse than we even know. His relationship with his teammates is deteriorating at a rapid pace.
So what do you do then?
Well, the problem they have right now is, you know, when you use the fifth pick in the draft on a 6'10" power player that by skill set and looking at the guy, and you say, you know what, this guy translates into an 18 and 10 type of power forward one day or center, it's very difficult to just wipe your hands of that because you wasted the fifth pick in the draft on him. I understand that. But at the same time, I can tell you right now, if there's nothing else that I will guarantee this season, I'm going to guarantee this is not going to turn out in a happy ending with Demarcus Cousins growing up one day and being a great, responsible, leading Sacramento King under Paul Westphal. That is not going to happen. Paul Westphal doesn't even want to coach this guy anymore. You know, listen. And this is all attitude, Mike, right? We're talking about personal things.
Yeah.
Let's get to on the court. He's shooting 31% from the field.
At 6'11", basically.
Okay. 31% from the field. He has 5 assists in 140-plus minutes of action.
That's a distributor if I've ever heard of
It's almost impossible to have those kind of assist numbers playing those kind of minutes at any position on the floor. Okay, so Paul Westphal brought him off the bench last night after the one-game banishment. And he addressed the media before the game and said, listen, I don't want you guys thinking he's coming off the bench because of this incident, the trade demand. This is because he's not playing good enough to deserve to be in the starting lineup. So there's a lot of stuff going on with DeMarcus Cousins. I wouldn't want to be a Sacramento King for all the money in the world right now because I know how a guy like that sucks the enthusiasm out of your team.
It's a buzzkill. It's got to be a buzzkill in the locker room, as you mentioned before, although I think that there has to be some sort of rallying for the rest of the guys, when you look at one player in particular who's a malcontent, do you use that?
It's a good point. You do get some of that. You'll get a sort of a galvanization of the rest of the team because it's kind of like they put this guy in an island and he's like the outcast, and the rest of you kind of rally around being more of a team despite DeMarcus Cousins. The problem is you can't avoid it, man. That moodiness. You know, that glower that comes in the locker room every day, that gets on the bus, on the road games, the unhappiness, that kind of the way he talks to, you know, he's already had issues twice with just staff members, strength and conditioning people and PR people. It's just a guy that you don't want to be around. So even though you can sit there and rally around the other 14 guys can rally around and say, hey, listen, let's do our thing and forget about DeMarcus. You can't, man. He casts a big shadow. He's there every single day and he's bringing everybody down. And this is not going to turn out well. So they're going to have to, at some point, seriously try to get into some trade talks for DeMarcus Cousins. And I guess the Nets have already thrown it in there. Hey, we're interested.
Well, that's what I want to bring up to you, because you said you didn't play with a guy who was at least on your roster. Who
not
had
that bad. I played with some bad guys.
Okay.
Not along these lines.
The guys that you played with in that category, were they younger players or older players?
Veterans.
Okay, then that makes it worse. Here's the point that I would bring up. As a young guy who's clearly immature, there has to be, I think, for every player, every person, I'm not just talking basketball, where you flip the switch and you sort of grow up.
Yep.
Sometimes that maturity comes a little bit later. And for DeMarcus Cousins, maybe that's the case. And maybe it'll come too late for him. But I guess my point is, if you have that veteran around you, how much does that help? If you have veteran leadership that can take a guy like DeMarcus Cousins, if the Kings say, look, this is not going to work out. We invested a fifth overall pick on him. Let's move on. Let's trade him. You know what the skill set is. I mean, obviously the guy can play. You don't do what he did at the college level. You don't get drafted fifth overall if you don't have some game. Maybe there's a team that's out there. And the only reason why I bring this up is the other day, and I was in the cafeteria. I was working with LaFonso Ellis. We're having dinner. Jalen Rose comes by, and Jalen says, LaFonso was one of those guys, one of those veterans who sort of, and every team needs a veteran. And LaFonso, we were talking about this, and he had said, we didn't, on those Nuggets teams when he was first playing, he's like, we didn't really have veterans to sort of show us the way. And this Kings team is not veteran laden.
Right.
I can't help but think that maybe an immature guy like that sort of needs some of those veterans to help him out.
I bet I was on every kind of team in the NBA. I was on the youngest team in the NBA in Dallas one year when the average age was 23 years old. I played on teams that were veteran laden, like my rookie year in Phoenix. And it's more than just saying, well, they got veterans, so he'd be fine there. Because listen to me, I played for the most passive personality veteran players and with some of those guys you've ever seen that never want to confront anybody about anything, that just want to show up, be the first guy in the weight room and lead that way, and then get out and not do anything with guys socially, not make anybody accountable. So it's not just a veteran. It's not just a number of years on your bio when you look somebody up on Wikipedia. It's about your personality type. And Demarcus Cousins needs to be in a place right now where there's 4 or 5 of those guys that are not just veteran players that have accomplished some things that maybe he respects, but also are not afraid to literally get in his face, tell him off, kick him out of the gym if you have to as a player, and have 4 guys backing you up on it. DeMarcus Cousins right now needs the toughest love of any player I've seen in a really long time, because he is right now, he's getting to the point where he's going to start to do some things that are going to haunt him for the rest of his career if he's not careful and starts to get in line and understand what being part of a team and working towards something is all about. Because right now, DeMarcus Cousins has one thing on his mind, and that's DeMarcus Cousins. And that's all he really cares about, how he feels at that particular moment.
If you're a general manager and you know what the skill set is and you're one of those bottom feeders, do you just feed the beast?
I wouldn't touch DeMarcus Cousins. You couldn't. If I was a general manager in the NBA, because I'm telling you right now, you can find talent that also gives you high character.
Okay.
They're out there. And it means you sacrifice, because and it's mainly because of what I said in the beginning. You can't have someone suck the enthusiasm for what you're doing out of the locker room. You can't do it, because it affects everybody on that roster. And listen, if that means you win 6 less games because you don't have DeMarcus Cousins, but the atmosphere and environment was so much better and guys were buying in and trying to do the things it takes to win basketball games and grow as a team, you will overcome that at some point, and you'll make up for those wins. So you couldn't pay me to touch a guy like DeMarcus Cousins. I know the personality type, and I just wouldn't want it.
3 teams I'll throw out there, and I'm not saying that he's a good fit on any one of these teams. I'm just throwing them out there when you talk about veterans who will get in your face, winners, that, hey, you know what? I mean, the skill set is there for a guy who can play, and he was a big. Boston comes to mind. They could use some help in the front court, and, I mean, their big 3 is as veteran as it gets, and Kevin Garnett, from what I've been told, is not worried about making an impression. San Antonio would be another, I mean, with Pop and Tim Duncan and those types. And I'll throw out Miami in the sense that they certainly could use a big, and when you have dominant players like LeBron and Wade, you sort of have to fall in line, I would think. Those 3 teams, potentially. I mean, I know you said if you're a general manager, you're not going to pull a trigger on that, but would you even consider it knowing the guys that you have in your locker room?
Well, there's a couple things you have to ask yourself, though. Like Miami and Boston come to mind. What do either one of those teams have that's remotely interesting to the Sacramento Kings?
But the Kings, what if they're saying, you know what, I'll take 10 cents on the dollar
but
if he's that bad.
I mean, but literally look at Boston's roster. Okay,
yeah.
So you're saying obviously they're not getting rid of Garnett, Allen, Pierce, or Rondo. I mean, we agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't get rid of any of those guys for DeMarcus Cousins?
Nope.
So then what's left? I mean, if you're Doc Rivers, would you even contemplate getting rid of like a Brandon Bass for DeMarcus Cousins? First of all, like I said, DeMarcus Cousins hasn't even proven yet that he can be a successful player in this league. He hasn't even come close to that. I know he's doing a pretty good job on the boards this year. When you're shooting in the low 30 percentile as a 6'11 center in this league, there's a serious problem because most of your shot attempts are within 6 feet. And I've played with guys that flat out had no offensive game. at the NBA level that played center that were shooting up in the mid-40s minimum, and most big guys should be over 50%.
Yeah.
To be in the low 30s, it tells you an awful lot about DeMarcus Cousins' mindset.
Shooting funk?
Yeah, shooting funk. Yeah, he's in a slump. But the other thing is, listen, a guy like DeMarcus Cousins, and look, I know I'm being awfully hard on him, and he's a young player, and I hope DeMarcus Cousins does turn this around. I really do. You know, Ron Artest had a lot of emotional issues earlier in his career, and he got to the point where he was a pretty darn good player, and at one point for a 2 or 3 year stretch, probably a top 10 player in this league.
Yeah.
And he turned it around emotionally. I'm not saying he can't do it. I will say this. If he goes somewhere this year to one of those teams you just talked about, and he might look like he's buying in because he doesn't really have a choice because he realizes that, like, he's on an island kind of, but he's going to be faking his way through it. And even on those nights when he gets 4 touches and he plays 22 minutes and he's playing in a Miami Heat uniform and they win and he's playing alongside LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, he is still not going to be happy. And that's something that you have to take into account with DeMarcus Cousins. Until he matures and appreciates this game a little bit more, he's going to continue to be the same person.
All right, I want to get to those emails coming up. NBA Today at ESPNRadio.com. He's Tim Legler. Mike Yam with you at LegsESPN. By the way, I did find you on Twitter, and I think you had like 140 followers, which is just...
I got like 240, man.
Okay, is that what it is?
Something like that.
All right, I perused it.
Look, I'm telling you right now, I just don't get into it.
Well, you're going to get into it. That's my sole mission before the NBA season is out. Mike at Mike_Yam.